Okay, this is Joshua Adams, co-creator of the Godfo universe, here to give y'all a quick review episode. But before we get into today's review, I want to say thank you to everyone who has been supporting our channel, everybody who's been watching our podcast, following the comic books. If you've checked out the mailing list and our Godfo website to read the Lamentations, see our short films, things like that, we really appreciate it. Working hard to finish the first volume of Apollyon 20XX and get that out to you as soon as possible here in the spring. So for today, I want to review a series of books that I've really enjoyed these past couple of years. They're ones that I haven't heard a lot of people talking about. They haven't gotten as much attention as I think they deserve. The books are a series. Currently, there are 2 volumes. The series is called The Covenant of Steel, and it's written by a guy named Anthony Ryan. Now, Anthony Ryan has written other stuff before. He's written a series that involves gladiators. It's sort of similar to the show, the Stars, I think it was Stars, that had the Spartacus, Blood and Sand, that sort of vibe. So he's written some more high fantasy type stuff. With dragons and things like that. And the Covenant of Steel, which is the first book is The Pariah, the second book is Martyr. These are fantasy, but I would describe them as more like a low fantasy. There is magic, but it's not present a lot. There's not a lot of fantastical creatures in it. There's no, orcs and goblins and dragons and that sort of thing. It's a much more grounded fantasy. And I'm going to show you the cover art is very good, and it gives you it's a really good representation of the tone of these books. So one of the words that gets thrown around a lot in fantasy now is grimdark. And I think it started with the Warhammer universe of games and things, but it's expanded to include books in the fantasy genre that are a little bit more on the graphic or the more dour, nihilistic, I guess more brutal violence, more mature kind of fantasy world. We think about Game of Thrones as a grimdark series. This is definitely, I would definitely say the Covenant of Steel series falls into a grimdark category if you like that. I would also say that while it is dark at parts and there's a lot of battles, there's a lot of violent fights and things, it is more lighthearted than a lot of the books that you would read typically from the genre. So if if it's a turn off to you to hear the words or the phrase grimdark because it's just gonna be depressing, this series is not like a consistently a downer kind of series. It's got a lot of humor. It's got a lot of the main narrator of the story he's very sarcastic, and he actually I'll be one to admit that typically I'm hesitant to get into books that have a first person narrative, just because so often it feels so contrived and so silly. But in the case of these books, I would say that Anthony Ryan and this main character, uh, he's got a good sense of voice that never becomes annoying, never becomes really that. He's not an arrogant character, so he doesn't come across as somebody that you want to punch in the teeth. But to give you an idea of this story, the main character of the story is named Alwyn, and he starts his life. He's raised as an outlaw. He's part of an outlaw band or gang that live in the woods outside of a major city in this kingdom. And the leader of his gang is a person who has royal ties. And I don't want to say anything more than that, but the man that leads his gang has ties to royalty and to the in some ways could potentially have a claim on the throne. But he instead is leading this band of outlaws. And this character, Alwyn, his life goes through a series of different changes. He ends up in a prison, and while in that prison, he meets a person who is deeply religious, and it's a made up religion. It's not Christianity or Islam or anything like that. It's made up religion. But this character trains him and teaches him how to be a scribe. So he learns how to write, he learns how to read, he learns, and quickly, he takes to it quickly because he's smart. He has a good mind for it. And he becomes very useful in that way. He also, against his own, I guess in spite of himself, he finds himself drawn to the religion as well. He's not fully sure he believes in this, but it does at least speak to him. And from there he, without giving away too much, he does not spend his whole life in the prison. He ultimately ends up part of an army, and this army is led by someone who has become a religious figure herself. And if you've ever read the manga or watched the anime of Berserk, if you like Berserk, you're going to love this series. Part of it is the setting. It's got that medieval, sort of a medieval Dark Ages type of fantasy setting. It's very grounded. But the element that I think most people, if you like Berserk, and the thing about this that I think you're going to like is just how in Berserk you had the character of Griffith, who initially is sort of the underdog, who has this band of the Hawk, and they start rising to prominence and making a lot of nobles angry as they do, and ultimately that that leader character becomes almost a religious icon in a way. That's sort of the trajectory of these books. The first book, like I said, was called Pariah. The second book is The Martyr. And essentially you have this woman who is leading the army who survives through supernatural means, survives a being martyred. Now, I'm not going to spoil the ins and outs of how and why, but it sets her up from that point to be this religious icon, sort of a messiah figure, and she definitely has a messiah complex. And Alwyn is getting kind of pulled into things that he's not entirely sure he wants to be a part of. So to boil all of it down is, how well did I like these books? How well would I recommend them? First off, how well did I like them? The first book I loved. The second book I immediately purchased. The third book is coming out in either June or July. I've already pre-ordered book 3. I don't know if it's going to go beyond that. I think it may be planned as just a trilogy. As far as I know, he hasn't announced any other books beyond the initial 3. So it's not like a 13-book Wheel of Time commitment. If you want a shorter series, this is one to hop on. It's incredibly well written, especially when it gets into the action sequences, the battles, and all of the fight scenes are so vivid and so well written and genuinely action packed. There's a lot of good humor. There's a lot of things that the main narrator will say that that I literally did laugh out loud while reading the book, which is rare. None of it comes across as corny. It's dark but not too dark, mature but not vulgar or overly wallowing in the darkness and the depravity. So it's a good middle of the road grimdark series that I think most people would enjoy. So again, it's the Pariah and the Martyr by Anthony Ryan. The Covenant of Steel is the name of the series, and the third book should be coming out this summer. And as I already mentioned earlier, we have our first volume of Apollyon 20XX, which is a comic book. It will be the length of 200-something pages. It is basically you're getting an entire trade paperback run of like a first year of a comic. We're putting all out at once in one volume. It's a type of story that lends itself to being read all at once. It's going to be black and white. It is it's the beginning of our Godfoe universe, which, if we've looked at any of our other videos, that our timeline spans millennia. But this is the story of the beginning, and our beginning of our world. It begins with an ending, if that makes sense. This is the story of how our world as we know it comes to an end and is replaced by something different. If you like Akira, if you like Chris Claremont era X-Men, I think you'll enjoy this. If you like manga, there's a lot of manga influence, particularly in the black and white artwork, but also in the story beats. We've tried to write a story that doesn't necessarily follow all of the traditional Western storytelling tropes. We're very inspired by things like Akira and Neon Genesis Evangelion, and particularly for tone. So if any of that sounds like stuff you'd like, go to the www.godfoeuniverse.com. Check out the Lamentations and all the other things that we have up on there. Also, go to Legacy Comics. That's comics with an X.com. You can order the first Ash Can, which is like basically a teaser. It's a short introduction to the world of the Godfoe universe. You can order that there. And you can also order plenty of other really cool comics. Legacy is very fortunate to have many good artists and good writers in the stable. To be a young company, we're coming after you with some really good comics. So like and subscribe. Tell a friend. Share the video. Check out these books. They are really good and really underrated. And I will be back sometime soon, hopefully, to review some more things or to discuss some other topics with you. Until then, have a good day, good night, whatever time it is for you, and we will see you next time.